Hi, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. And this is going to be my first show airing on YouTube as Stories of the Supernatural. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to broadcast a live stream with the Mr. Charles Del Campo, which is my guest, because he had to fly out to the West Coast. So I went ahead and I interviewed him. So, and you're going to find that it's a very, very interesting show. Originally, the intent of the interview was just to go over ritual murders and sacrifices, things of this nature, since this is one of the areas that he specializes in. But he took me all over the map. We talked about a lot of different things, and you'll see that I'll come back on during each segment to go over what we went into, because we just spoke about everything. And as a matter of fact, in this first part, you're going to see that, we're going to start off with talking about occult murders, human sacrifices, things, ritual murders of this type, since this is one of the areas that he does specialize in as a private detective. All right, but then, of course, we're going to go into the occult connection behind some murders that sometimes law enforcement overlooks because they just don't understand what they're looking at. And then, of course, the evil versus insanity. Are you just evil, or are you insane in order to commit such evil acts? And then, believe it or not, then we go off down the bunny trail, and we talk about Templars and exorcisms and UFOs. And that's just the first segment, so I'm hoping that you're going to enjoy it. I hope you're going to subscribe to my channel and you're going to like this video. I always welcome feedback from my viewers about the show, about the subject, if they'd like to see more about a certain subject, if they'd like to have me have that guest come back. And also, I wanted to apologize for the quality of the video. Unfortunately, my videographer, we have been tramping out in the field all day long, and there's a lot of movement to the video, and I apologize for that. It was just, we taped this at the end of a very, very long day. So, and I'm also on a learning curve in order to produce these. So, I apologize ahead of time if you're going to get a little bit of moving videos, maybe a little bit of lagging with the audio or the video, etc. And I promise you, I am going to improve along those areas. So, and also, you might also hear sometimes background noise because I'm taping this part now from my home, and I live in an older house and have a lot of animals. So if sometimes you hear like barking or some type of little bit of noise, I can't help that. I can't control the animals. So again, welcome to my show, Stories of the Supernatural. I hope you really enjoy it. I know I enjoyed making it, and I look forward to bringing a lot of interesting guests. I will be going out in the field also to do some paranormal investigations, maybe joining some other teams, because I've been doing this for over almost 30 years. So we'll have different formats. And again, I welcome any feedback from my viewers, and away we go. So, Charlie, as we were talking about that, sometimes the sacrifices, and I'm not even going to say, whether you want to call it mental illness or whether it's somebody that's attached to Satanism or their own mental processes, yes, that they feel that they need to sacrifice, the ultimate sacrifice, which is a human being, that sometimes they're not that obvious. They don't fall into that Hollywood version of all the obvious signs that, this was a sacrifice or this was an occult crime. Right. That sometimes, especially when it's stranger on stranger, which makes it much more difficult to solve, that there is some type of connection, just not a serial killer getting his kicks because this is his type of victim. Right. That there's more to it than that.
Well, I think that the case at hand that you previously mentioned from 1974, the 4 women that were found there dead, I think that's a secondary crime scene. Mm-hmm. You have to look at the first. And of course, the first will contain most of the DNA, fingerprints, and other type of related evidence for the capture of the perpetrator. This was just dumping sites. I don't think he was actually engaging in that particular site for the murders. And it's an isolated area. There's very limited traffic.
Right.
There's low police enforcement patrol in that area.
Absolutely. Yeah, the time when they were dumped, yes, this was the middle of
nobody's going to be patrolling the alligator alley.
Exactly. Exactly.
For anything of that factor. Yeah, that happens a lot of times. Just like Jeffrey Dahmer, he pinpointed his apartment, and he lured them in with his persona, and he looked very calm and collective and intellectual, very handsome individual. And if you look at the criminologist of the psychologist analysis of his behavior, everything seems to be practically justifiable.
Right.
And it's insane. You have David Ramirez from California as a serial killer, and Hail Satan, and he did proclaim that it was Satan that was influencing him in order to commit his murders and rapes and just terrorizing the community. So every single crime depends on the perpetrator. They're all uniquely engaging in some type of Machiavellical undertaking, and some of them do it, like you say, trying to bring fiction into reality in order to get attention. You have the BKTT killings, and he wanted his day in court, and that was part of the agreement with the judge, and he sang throughout the whole process when no one else has been allowed to do that.
Now let me ask you something, and some of the things, and that sometimes we look at the lifestyle of the victims, and we think, oh well, of course, this person in some cases is a prostitute or they were drugged. It was like, oh, but sometimes, yeah, that's what it looks like as appearance-wise. That,
right.
But yeah, they were easy in the sense of to be taken and abducted and maybe killed and then dumped, but that doesn't take away from the reason why the person did it to begin with.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes. It's an overview of profiling that you do in the characteristics of human behavior with these people that are not necessarily mentally ill, just plain evil.
Okay.
If you ask the criminologist or the psychologist or the private detective involved in cult investigations, it's a different perspective. And of course, when you're a private detective, you're more flexible, you're mandated, people talk to you more frequently. I specialize in missing children across the nation. And one of the agreements that I have with law enforcement is that I will not receive any credit in the finding of the children. They don't want that. Because if that was the case, then I would receive such a great reputation for finding missing children, and people will be coming to me and not law enforcement.
Exactly.
So it has happened before, especially in Metro-Dade. And it's the same with finding people that have been missing and have never been located. I have the expertise to do this. Unfortunately, it takes great funds to finance these type of projects because in the scheme of the investigation, there's a lot of cost. And there's a lot of things that need to be done. And it's very unfortunate. A lot of the departments have constrained. They work 8 to 5. They have to go home to their families and their wives.
They have caseloads.
Yeah, they don't have time for the OT. They have a lot of, like you say, caseloads, and they have to meet deadlines. Otherwise, they can be reprimanded.
Right.
So the private detectives out there, the ones that have a track record in law enforcement, military, or working with the state or any of the intelligence agencies, do bring a lot of tools into resolutions into this type of cases.
Let me ask you something. Do you think in your experience that somebody, and like I said, this is the angle that I'm thinking of, somebody that is thinking, I want to kill this human being for whether he's a serial killer or he's doing it for occult reasons or religious beliefs, whatever they might be, that he's thinking, well, you know what, if I kill a streetwalker, this is not going to get as much attention from police enforcement as if I kill a soccer mom. You know what I'm saying? That they kind of put this into who they're going to choose as their victims, because exactly what you said, that despite the best intention of the law enforcement, they're going to think, well, this, if it's a prostitute, for example, or it could have been anybody,
No, you hit it on the nail. Most of the times, they are predators as perpetrators of the weak.
And opportunistic, I imagine, as well.
Yeah, they really reconnaissance their victim, their prey, just like a falcon does when he's going to attack. That's what distinguishes the falcon against some of the other birds. And it's the same methodology. And it's unfortunate. What we're not taught is to take safeguards and precautions. And that's why we're trying to bring programs like yours to create an awareness what's actually going on there. News media refuses to indulge in this underground undertaking of cult investigations, which are murder related, a lot of them, and they're trying to put it under the rug and brush it off. No, it was just a homicide, when it is not, because if you don't develop a lead to catch the perpetrator, it's going to become an ongoing crime.
Of course, it's not going to stop. Now, let me ask you, in your experience and what you found out from your cases, when somebody does kill another human being for, and I'm not going to put just on Satanists, because I know that's like the favorite target of like human sacrifice,
Right.
anybody for whatever reason.
True.
Like, the Zodiac killer,
Right.
he was thinking that his victims were going to serve him in the afterlife.
Right.
Whatever, however they work it. What is it in your experience that you have found that was his reasoning? What is the reasoning that they gain the person's power? What would spur that thing where I want to kill this person, be for an occult reason or
Right.
a sacrificial reason?
I think there is a common denominator in my third book, The Circus of the Neanderthals. It's in Spanish, El Circo de los Cavernícolas, which is on eBay and Amazon, received literary award, and eventually will be printed in English. The last chapter deals with serial killers, and specifically the ones that practice cannibalism.
Okay.
And I started doing extensive research, and I was not allowed by the Department of Correction to do personal interviews. The government actually restricts that. So I couldn't get the clearances, which is very unfortunate, because the psychologists that were evaluating them were not addressing the proper questions.
Okay.
And I saw that there's a common denominator in all of them, that they all have stated the devil has some type of involvement in this, where they felt possessed. So we have to look at like, exorcism. Well, Jesus Christ used to practice exorcism.
Right.
According to the biblical scriptures. So it depends what point of book you take as reference. But having said that, my experiences have been in the studies of this deranged behavior, that there's a fad of the practice of demonology now more than ever.
Right.
Number one, and there's a tremendous increase for abduction of children and adolescents. Also, besides the sex trade that is going on, which there's over
Like, in other words, they
25,000.
kind of entwine one thing with the other.
Yeah, a lot of them. It's over 25 to 30,000 people in the United States that are being abducted for either or. And at the same time, you have the derangements of a large demand underground for what we have for satanic circles, for the sacrifices of human life. And, law enforcement, unfortunately, if you don't have a dead body, then you don't have a crime scene.
Exactly, right.
So they fail to do a lot of times preliminary evaluation, whether it's cult related or not. And a lot of times this happens. I've seen cases that in the crime scene they try to make it look like it's a cult related crime, and it is not. It's just to throw off law enforcement.
Right.
And you have pentagrams with certain symbols.
Like it's overly obvious, in other words.
It's overly obvious, and it's not indicative of the actual ceremonies and rituals. For example, you have Aleister Crowley, he practiced the law of Telema, and so you have to stick with that. You have Baphomet, this completely misunderstood figure that was designed by Eliphas Levis, one of the greatest authors, transcendental magic, from the 18 to 1900s. And people look at the Baphomet, which presumably it is claimed within Freemasons, which I am, of the ranks of Knight Templars, that Jacques de Molay was burned at the stake by the Inquisition as a result of the admiration and the adoration of this figurine. History, it's completely, there's no archaeological findings to substantiate that.
Okay.
So you have to know the methodologies, the principles, the rituals, the ceremonies, the passwords that it really entails true demonology. Some of them have it, a lot of them don't. Some of them are trying to commit a crime just so they can aggrandize themselves. I committed a murder, which is satanic related, and it's
Right.
just for fun.
And that's exactly my point, which is some of these, and you made it very clear, especially lately, where it's like it's over the top, and that's what my question was, like some of these truly sacrificial acts, for whatever, whether it's Satanism or anything else, sometimes it's much more subtle.
Yes.
Okay, if that's what really their intent is, versus like the Hollywood version of, you know, the altar and the pentagrams and the this and the that. And also, and I was going to ask you, have you ever found, because, you know, now there's a lot of the thing with the people being possessed and
True.
and all this, and of course the typical exorcist version, which is where the person does all these, you know, speaks in voices and all this.
Incantations, yeah.
Have you ever run across somebody, okay, which you would consider possessed by evil, which I think is much scarier to think that they pass off as pretty normal, you know? You know what I'm saying? They're not doing all these very evident things that it's like, oh, quick, get a priest and exorcise this person.
Right.
They're really truly evil, okay, because of what they do, including killing other human beings. Have you ever met somebody that when you looked at them in your eyes, you said, wow?
Yes, absolutely.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
I think that, to answer your question, I think the most authoritative analysis, Emily Rose, the possession of Emily Rose in England, and this can be found on YouTube. And the priest, Jesuit, was there to conduct the exorcism.
Right.
And it's clearly, even the parapsychology have been able to substantiate in all scientific findings that there is such a thing as possession. Now, possession doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to do something evil. In this particular case of Emily Rose, we find that it was an old spirit, and just speaking in different languages and terminologies that was not completely understood, special odors and emanations ejecting out of the voice, in which the vocal voice of her would have never been able to accomplish that. Now, in reference to looking at people that you can tell that they are evil in perspective, not necessarily because of their actions, but people that you can look into their eyes and say, oh my God, this is an evil, this is a bad person. Oh yes, I've seen that, and very scary.
And by this I don't mean a psychopath.
No,
I mean,
no,
somebody
no,
that is a psychopath unless he has a violent
I remember
streak doesn't necessarily mean he's going to go around and kill somebody.
I remember I was in a case in Puerto Rico, and these two individuals were in a car, and we were crossing the path, and I looked at them. They looked like gangsters, you know,
Right.
and they have the typical outlook. Back in those days, now it's a fashion with all the tattoos, their earrings, and all of that. And when I looked into their eyes, I mean, I can tell that these people have killed a lot of people.
Okay.
And I was completely amazed that, you know, you lose your soul after a certain time when you're murdering people. There's something that separates you from being a human
in humanity.
And humanity. And there's a lot of people out there in the United States that are killing people, and they become missing people in law enforcement reports because they have not been found, because they've been buried in the desert, they've been thrown in the Everglades with the alligators.
And I'm going to segue because recently, you know, it's and we're going to go into, where lately a bunch of people have gone missing in national parks. And, you know, you have some, you know, some paranormal investigators or theories going around that, you know, they're being abducted by aliens, you know.
Right.
And I'm not putting that down, but I'm getting to the point where what you were saying, that there's a bunch of people, even not necessarily national parks, that go missing, okay, and unless I have a family member that pursues with, like, where's this person, sometimes, and if there were no, like you said, no remains are found, no, you know, no victim, no crime, it's like, okay, so what happened to this person? Eventually, time goes by, and nothing comes of it. And there's a lot of people like that.
Well, you're now transcending into ufology, which I'm also known.
Right, I know that we've done.
Because I've been to Roswell, Area 51, San Juan, Puerto Rico, at the Arecibo Observatory, Los Alamos. I've been to White Sands, Roswell. I think I mentioned in all of these places in order to verify if there's actually any type of UFO sightings. Yes, they are. Coincidentally, last year I was in Socorro, New Mexico, where they have over 100 satellite systems in which for interstellar communication.
Right.
Arecibo, Puerto Rico has the largest satellite system in the world for interstellar communication. And communication SETI, search for extraterrestrial intelligence. I am a believer, and there's a great book out there by Timothy Good, Alien Contact. Highly recommended, because it's the most non-fictional, with official documents from the Pentagon about the acknowledgement that they are UFOs. There's extraterrestrial life. I mean, think about it. Just by mere hypothesis, the universe and the galaxies is shows.
Now, let me ask you something, because you know you're gonna have ufologists that say yes, there's aliens out there, but they kind of like just observe us. They don't have interaction with us. And then you have the other believers that say that you know, you have not only you have different versions of alien or extraterrestrials, and that some of them are nice and some of them are not so nice, and then
True.
you get the butt probe guys, you know, the ones that
Whether you're from Andromeda or another
or
galaxy.
whatever.
Well,
What do you
Timothy establishes in his book that the latest advancement in technologies within 10 years, which is really a tremendous leap. It's not technology that progressed. It was a real leap, and they call it alienology for technology.
Right.
And there is an agreement, according to Timothy Good, of exchange of humans for experiments in lieu of acquiring
quid pro quo
technology.
kind of deal. Okay.
Yeah. So it's far-fetched, but however, if you look in YouTube, you see a lot of people that have done regressions
Exactly.
in parapsychologists that are very prominent. They have established a consistency of people from different states that have not met one another, have never seen a UFO movie, and time lapse and experiments that were done that are highly not questionable, but worthy of evaluation based on their assessments that they're all claiming the same type of abduction, missing time, certain items of scars in their bodies, and certain traumas
So in
in
other
the
words,
process.
that even though they have no connection between them, they describe similar experiences.
Yeah.
That it's like, how can these people agree on the same type of experiences when they have no connection whatsoever between
There's
them?
actually 3,700 to 3,700 official authenticated reports that have panned out. The other ones are people with their subconscious. They had a dream, they saw a movie, goes into your subconscious. When you go to sleep, you dream that, then you don't know whether you're in a dream state
whatever,
or not.
it could be it's
all of
not-
that. Yeah, and they were able to decipher in analysis what was true and what was not. But it was very interesting because a lot of people were identifying the spacecraft on the inside, and the Martian alien look, grace as we call them, and
Right, yes,
and that's
right.
amazing. That really
Now
is
let me ask you
amazing.
something, since the topic here is evil, and you do have some ufologists or that, as a matter of fact, Stephen Hawking recently said, you know, we have to be careful of alien contact because whenever you have historically a culture or civilization that is superior to one than the other, eventually, basically, you get victimized. Do you think there's any truth to the fact that obviously any UFO or extraterrestrial life that comes here is going to be superior to us, that we would eventually fall victim to them? In other words, that they might not have such nice intentions towards
Yes, no,
us?
absolutely. I think proof of that is a movie in Hollywood, which was not fictionalized, Fire in the Sky.
Yes.
You know, where they were abducted and they suffered. And this is all very well documented from law enforcement and the people that gave the lie detector test, which provided consistency as to their testimony, which they were able to prove that they were not lying. There was no deception whatsoever. From my field investigations in all these areas, I have interviewed engineers and people from NASA. And actually, if you look in YouTube, Charles Del Campo, UFOs, you're going to see a whole bunch of films in there. Because I take that from the perspective of a skepticism, you know.
Right, exactly.
Seeing is believing.
Sure.
Yes, you're absolutely right. You have David Icke that is exaggerating with reptilians and so forth.
Okay.
Reptilian look-alike animal is not going to have a higher intelligence in order to do interstellar travel. So that's dismissed. That's just to create fiction. And it does entertain the heck out of the ignoramus. It entertains people out there. Yes, it is said that this was in the blue book under the Air Force investigation, that there are some hostile aliens not from this galaxy, and they have an interest in the humanoids and certain raw materials from planet Earth that are sort of limited in some of the other galaxies.
Okay.
And as a result of that, you see that type of different spacecraft that are not consistent one with the other. Proof of this, if you will look into NASA, Apollo 13 was able to film multiple lightings in the stratosphere and in space, and one of them approaches and shoots and then moves. You know, that's intelligence. That's movement and trajectory, avoiding a collision. Yeah, so it has to be crafted. And then it was glowing. Our comprehension of something glowing with movement, you know, it doesn't have to be the same anatomy of our DNA composition. These are more sublime and they're more enlightened. And then you have the other one that is more grotesque in appearances. They don't have speech as we know it. It's more psychic, extrasensory perception, communication.
Right, and yeah, you have victims that say, well, they didn't talk to me verbally, but they communicated with me.
Exactly. And a lot of times it's a set of vibrations which later gets translated into our thinking of reasoning. Well, this is what he said. And of course, they don't need to dress up because they don't have a Walmart in the next galaxy, and they don't have drive-through franchises.
Right, yeah, they don't have any of the human conditions that we live under.
But they get to participate of the wonders of the universe and travel from the universe and the stars and get close to the moon, get close to the sun, and that in itself, it doesn't get any better.
Right, and that's when we start hoping that they're going to be nice to us, because obviously, if you have a civilization or whatever you want, or species, whatever you want to call it, that's able to do that, obviously they're going to be superior to us in that case. Now,
but look at the humanoids. Advancement in technology doesn't represent advancement in spiritual enlightenment.
And you're absolutely right. It doesn't. One thing doesn't come with the other. So we've got our fingers crossed on that. How about animal mutilations? Do you think that there's the thought that all these unexplained animal mutilations, that these are aliens, and then there's other people going, well, why would they travel all this way to do that? What do you think about that?
Funny enough, you mentioned that. I was actually 5 years ago in Socorro, New Mexico, where I got hired by a rancher to look into this. And the reason why I was there, because he was missing a lot of cattle, then he found that some of the cows, which Timothy Book mentions, he has these pictures, the same as I do in his book. It's really a coincidence. And why Socorro, New Mexico? In this isolated desert, which a couple of miles you have the observatory of all these 100 satellite systems.
So it's close by.
Yeah. So it was the telescopes are there for a reason.
Sure.
And the ranches are there. And I looked at the cow, and I have pictures of this, and I can see an incision about knee high of 2 centimeters. And through there, when we open up with a knife, the cow is missing all the intestines, everything, completely. And there was not a drop of blood. It was not a secondary crime scene. Everything happened there in that location.
Okay.
The cows, when they tilt, they usually, they can have a heart attack, and they still, and sometimes they don't get up. But when they looked into it and they opened them up completely, there was nothing whatsoever. But the incision was extremely visible through. It was like about 2 inches off the rectum area, and there you see it. And it was really amazing because no one had opened up the cow yet.
How many animals had this happened to him? How many of his animals?
Up to date, I think that he ignored the first 25.
And then he just couldn't think.
After that, it dawned on him and said, hold on a minute. He called law enforcement in Socorro. Now, if you know anything about Socorro, New Mexico, please do not go there. It's an extremely hostile area. They treat tourists with hostility, everybody. In the hotels, in the restaurant, they refuse to serve you food. The Holiday Inn over there, they kick you out.
Okay, but you know what? I'm going to stop you right there, because we're going to do a little. Explain that to me. Then we're going to get back to that.
Because people are going to go like, I'm going to go to Socorro and check out the location.
Tell me the story about that.
Oh, no. It's a nightmare.
Health circles.
The thing is this, that, because a lot of people want to go to these areas,
true,
which are known for, UFO visitations and activity. But tell me what happened that you have. Where does this come from?
Every year that I have gone there,
right,
it's been the same thing. Not only me, but other people.
Okay.
And you're better off going into Roswell, or you're better off going into Area 51 in Raquel, in Nevada. By the way, you go to Nevada and you go through. It has a big sign, says extraterrestrial highway, and it's right off the chart. And you will see sightings over there at night. I kid you not.
Why is this
Socorro,
town?
New Mexico?
Why are they behaving like that?
I have no clue whatsoever. People are the meanest, and it's extremely poor people. It's a ghost town.
Okay.
You go there. The Holiday Inn tried to charge me $175 for a room. I said, well, that's impossible. I have a membership and everything. It's this. I said, we don't care. Everything with that attitude. And
but overall, just everybody there.
Yeah. It's a 10-block ratio blocks, but just like,
And let me ask you this: so getting back to what you were saying, as far as this gentleman, this rancher who had all these animals
Yes.
that were turning up, and law enforcement's not doing it for him.
No.
So he had to go to the next step and say, I need to get somebody to help me figure this out,
Right.
because
Which I did, and I was able to confirm what was going on. And I said, well, I don't think we have the technology in order. We can do liposuction and take out fat through the stomach.
Right.
But in order to take fully condensed organs like the heart, the liver, and all of that to feed through a sucking mechanism of 1 or 2 centimeters is impossible. It hasn't been developed yet. It's just not there, you know. And then we looked at the tongue to see if there were any residues,
Right.
anything that could have been taken from that puncture, and there was nothing whatsoever. I'm not a medical doctor, nor do I have preliminary, but you know, you do your investigative techniques and you try to ascertain what's visible and what it is not. And it was not conjecture in here for sure.
now, and I'm gonna ask a question which a lot of people that, you know, this debate goes back and forth. Let's assume, because there's no other explanation, you know, that this is some type of alien. Why would they do this? You know, because a lot of people say, well, you know, why are they, and I know you might not know the answer either, we might never understand it, like, why are they coming and sucking the blood and the guts or the internal organs out of a cattle? Okay, how many times are you going to do that?
No, I couldn't figure that myself, but Timothy Good in his book, Alien Contact, and I think I referenced it in Secret Societies Exposed, apparently enzymes.
Okay.
Enzymes.
So there's something that they're getting out of it besides
out
just...
of the enzymes, which is in correlation with the DNA and the chromosomes of humans that they have an interest in. They're trying to breed one of their own with one of our own.
Okay.
And what they lack in appearance, which is why repulsive, we have in beauty. I mean, think about this, people that are in their 50s and 40s,
Right.
you know, and if you look now at the new generation of women in their 20s, late 20s,
Right.
outrageously perfection, they look like goddess, they're gorgeous. People that are in their 50s, we didn't have that back in those days.
Right, no, I know, like, what is it
Yeah.
that they say, the 50 is the new 30?
Yeah, and we're not talking liposuction
No,
or
I know
breast
what you're
implant
saying.
or all
Okay.
of this surgical enhancement. I mean,
Right.
just natural beauty that is just unbelievable. So they're trying to integrate that in order to create a better race in combination with a high level of intelligence. They're called extrabiological entities, EBIs. They're not called extraterrestrials.
So, well, since we're here, let's go down that bunny bunny trail.
When you were there with the cows, did you see any crop circles?
Yeah, but they're not noticeable enough in which it leaves a burn location. Now, I'm here in Lake Placid, and the first UFO recording was in Sebring by Avon Park in here.
Okay.
And that used to be famous. When the internet came into play in the early 90s, that everybody like went crazy with it, that was one of the first downloads before YouTube came around that you can see on the internet. They eradicated that, it completely out.
Really?
Yeah, and that UFO was amazing. In one of the explorations that I did close here to Lake Placid, there's a lot of activity here in Lake Placid of
I know, you told me
UFOs
that.
and sightings in very low altitudes, and there's a lot of witnesses. We see them in here constantly every month. We're so accustomed to it, not like
Okay.
in the major metropolitan areas.
Right.
And people usually are not looking up, you know, especially here. There's not a lot of lighting, so you have more visuals. But I saw this round circle in an
Okay.
isolated location that it was completely burned and the size of a spacecraft, and I thought that was completely unusual and out of context in that particular place.
Do you think then, because you mentioned something about, you know, that you get other people that say that, you know, as a matter of fact, in that show, Ancient Aliens, they brought up that some people think that the UFOs, or not the UFOs, the extraterrestrials, that they seeded the humans long ago, and that basically they already interfered or engineered us, and that basically they're coming back, or they've been here all along, and in other words, they've been working with us all along. They already were, you know,
Right.
manipulating our genetics.
Right. Well, there's a paradox. If we follow the theory of Darwin within the academic intelligentsia of scholars, you know, that we evolved from the monkey, you know, that's definitely a joke. We don't see the monkeys continue to evolve, or so forth. The theory falls in itself. If we follow that premise
Right.
that we are here orchestrated and managed by extraterrestrial life, well, then we have to look at the premise of Scientology, and we don't want to go there. That's a cult in itself, you know.
Right.
I think that the origin of man archaeologically, there is no evidence to substantiate that, and unfortunately we have to rely on the science fictions of biblical scriptures, not only from the Bible but also from the Bhagavad Gita of the scriptures of the Hindus. We also have the Talmud and the Torah from Moses, and then we also have Muhammad with the Quran. If there was one God, you know, he would have come forward, not that I'm an atheist, and said, well, hold on a minute, I'm Muhammad, or I'm Jesus, or I'm this, or I'm that. So it all depends what we use as reference to arrive at that conclusion,
Right.
to make it soundable. No, I don't think so. I think that we have our own species, which is completely highly dangerous. I think we're more ferocious than lions and tigers and vultures. We're the only species that are involved in self-destruction. I think that we're willing now, we're talking about nuclear wars. We're not evolving, you know, and not everybody has become human. I know. We were talking about this earlier. You're a humanist. I'm an apocalyptic.
Right, I live in a friendly universe.
Yeah, in a friendly universe. I see different. I see black and white. There's no technical colors in there. But the hypothesis is there. However, I don't think that would be accurate for the following reasons. If that was the case, they would have interfered already, because we're living in some very dangerous times, and we always had corruption.
Hi, this is Marlene with Stories of the Supernatural, and I'm hoping that you liked that first segment of the interview with Charles Del Campo. Now we're going to go into the second segment, and as you can tell by the end of that one, we're already going off into different areas of discussion. Anyway, you're going to see that now we are going to go into, you know, we have a difference of opinion as far as if humans are going to persevere, how well they're going to do. I have more hope for mankind than he does, and you'll see what I mean. And I consider myself an optimist, and he's a pessimist. And I know he's going to be going, what? I can't believe she said that. But yeah. Anyway, a reference to something that, you know, we were discussing was that I personally go by that quote from Albert Einstein that the most important question you can ask is if the universe is a friendly place. I do believe that the universe is a friendly place. That doesn't take away from horrible things that happened. But I think that decision colors a lot of the outlooks and outcomes of your life. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and let's go into the second segment. And again, I hope that you are going to subscribe to my channel and that you're going to like this video. Enjoy.
Marijuana and narcotics, and it will keep on growing, and later it will be heroin. You'll be driving through like Burger King, let me have a heroin shot with a burger, you know.
But you know what?
We have lost morals, principles, and values.
But you know what? And I think that sometimes human beings tend to telescope at the time that they're living. But I'm going to give you an example. Let's say back during, Dark Ages into the Renaissance, where they had the bubonic plague or the Black Plague.
True.
Where you had millions and millions and millions of people who at that time really thought that this was the end of the world,
right,
and this was God's punishment. And you have to understand from that point of view that their reference is almost equivalent to when bad things happen, because when you're there because they didn't understand really the mechanics of what was happening when everybody around them was dying, their family members, their children, husband and wives. To them, it was apocalyptic, the equivalent of what's going on with us.
The dark
you see what I'm saying?
Sure.
So sometimes I tend to think that human beings of each age look at the circumstances of relative to what's going on with them, and they fail to see that we kind of like always go through some cycle.
History repeats itself.
Of punishment, or this is the end, or it's never been as bad as this. Okay, and of course. That has been, and I do believe that human beings are going to persevere and we're going to work it out, because we always do.
Hi, this is Marlene again, and now we're almost going down the home stretch of the interview, and you're going to see that now we're going to go into a very sensitive area, which is child abductions, child disappearances, things of this nature, and also how some of this unfortunately does lead back into occult crimes where children are being used in rituals, and the dangers of some cults, and how they do lead astray groups of people and parents along with their children. Also, we're going to talk a little bit about the Holy Death cult, or what they call Santa Muerte. And then we're going to talk about something really interesting, which is a conversation that Charlie had with one of Fidel Castro's bodyguards, or who used to be a bodyguard for him, which obviously this person went with him everywhere. And what he said, that I was really surprised by that, and you'll see what I mean when you hear it. And then we're going to go along into other types of, worship of dark forces and by other civilizations in the past. We're also going to look at Pazuzu, which I know has gotten a lot of exposure because of Zozo, etc., even though it's a very ancient, demon. And of course, it gained that notoriety when the movie The Exorcist came out. And we're going to talk about pyramids and, of course, Freemasons, which Charlie is one. So we're almost there. We're almost 2/3 of the way through. And again, I'm hoping you're enjoying this and you're going to subscribe to my channel and you're going to like this video. So hold tight.
Okay. So Charlie, you were explaining to me that that I'm an optimist, and you're not quite so optimistic about humans, but you're gonna say
Not at all.
Okay.
I think that we're in such a self-destructive path. We have GMOs, genetically modified organisms with our food consumption.
Mm-hmm.
We have the contamination, not only of our food supply, but also of the ambience with pollution. There's so many things. It's just we're going nowhere.
But
I think the damage is irreversible.
No, I and we could go around and around. We're gonna have another show on that, which is where I think, before, we would have diseases that would kill hundreds of thousands of people, or make them very sick. Like I'll give it as recently as less than 100 years ago, there were thousands of people that were dying from tuberculosis, very slow death, and now we've conquered that. We have things that we need to conquer and be better at, but I think we're going in the right direction. Okay, there's a lot of diseases now that have been eradicated. Okay, because of human technology and desire to help other human beings. So, like I said, I'm always the optimist. But let's get back to
my side of darkness. I've brought me into touch with the dark forces, and I do want to keep it there. Because there's a lot of things that you cannot disclose. I'm not a pessimistic person by nature. On the contrary, I'm very optimistic and have a lot of high self-esteem, especially when I undertake this type of crucial investigation to save lives or to risk my life and put myself out there as a lone wolf in places where law enforcement won't go, either when it's a missing person's case or it's a cult related by satanic circles. And the nature of my work, that's my world. That's my world.
And I'm gonna bring this right back to the very beginning of what we started, and I'm gonna touch on something. It's a very sensitive subject, but you mentioned it, and it's not only when people go missing, but when children go missing. And unfortunately, every day we hear about horrible crimes committed even by parents or family members. But what happens when we have children, that disappear, or that sometimes their bodies are found, and to think that they're being used or something along those lines.
Yes,
what
true.
do you know?
I want your audience to keep in mind that everything that we're saying here can be verified by going into the internet. You can either Google it or go to YouTube, and you can verify all this information, because it is bizarre in nature.
Right.
And it's more than actually the paranormal, and more than anomalies out there.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of statistical data, according to FBI statistics, of children missing in the United States bypasses over 50,000.
Wow.
And I'm not going to say the actual number in order not to look like a fool, but the audience out there, whoever is listening, we can research this.
Okay.
And it's amazing. You belong to a society that I'm not going to name its name. It's very notorious that specializes in missing children.
Mm-hmm.
And out of the top 10s, I have offered my free services to go
Right.
in there and finance $100,000 a person search,
Right.
and they have not even emailed me back, not one.
Well, because and you know, and it's unfortunate, but I mean, I know that
Why?
the media sometimes has been accused of that they cover, let's say, certain disappear. And I'm going to give you a perfect example, like when John Bonet was murdered,
Right.
and that became like a media circus, and who killed her, and then blah, 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 blah. You know, it was very fascinating. But then, you know, there was a lot of people that were saying, you know what? There have been other children murders and disappearances comparable, and they never received any recognition.
Right.
And like you said, that it goes unperceived, but that doesn't mean it don't happen.
True.
Okay, and along the same lines, they don't find who the perpetrator is, okay, or even the reason, and it happens a lot of times.
Children are specifically targeted as a result of the high demand for Black Sabbath or satanic demonology practices.
Mhm.
And what they do is once they get kidnapped, and they have a preference for newborns, they cut the jugular, in which they drain the blood.
Okay.
And a lot of times they won't perform cannibalism whatsoever, but they will mutilate the body of the leg and the fat of the back of the leg, which they turn that into a candle. In their distortion, this presumably is in order to ask for invocation of the hierarchy of the dark angels. And of course they have their names, which I know that I'm not going to mention this, it's not privy for examination. And they have the symbols, and, you know, and how to approach it. And it works for a lot of them, otherwise they wouldn't be doing them. So I think that a lot of people that believe that there's no such thing as Satan, they're completely wrong.
So let me ask you, and this is almost that question, what comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Right.
Do you think this person does this because of their involvement in something evil, or were they deranged and that's how they became involved with the evil?
Right, no,
You know, what
great
came
question.
first?
I think the personal motivation is different for everybody. For some it's power, wealth, love, sex, because you know a lot of them they engage in orgy. A lot of times what they're doing, and they do this in Miami, Florida, in Opalaca, the Haitian culture tradition, what they will do is they'll grab a 15 or a 16-year-old girl, very attractive, and they wait, well, so they have a full moon and all the astronomical charts are in correlation, and people practicing the Buddhism, voodoo, and what they do is 12 to 15 guys will impregnate her, you know, while she's sitting at a table, and once she's pregnant, she'll stay at that house. They will cater for her, and
Okay.
after 6 or 8, 9 months, she'll have the baby, and immediately the ceremony starts, you know, and this goes on. I was given this information by a police officer who wishes to remain confidential, and he says that we don't have authority to interfere a lot of times because their right to freedom to practice this type of religion, like Satanism, is actually a religion and is respected by the Constitution.
Right.
You know, in 1966, LaVey, when he established the Church of Satan, he was grounded rights by the Constitution
Exactly.
to practice on the amendment, that, as insane as it might look. And there's a lot of people there, and people don't go around saying I'm a Satanist, you know, because it does generate a lot of
Sure.
advocacy for good reasons.
Well, and you know, and like I believe that some of them, not all Satanists necessarily run around killing people.
Right.
It's just because that's their choice of their belief systems. And same token, I think that there's a lot of people out there that when they kill other human beings, they're not necessarily mentally ill or deranged.
Right.
And sometimes they have their own inner religion or belief system
Yeah.
that thinks that by killing this person, they're going to gain something, whatever it is. It might be that,
Right.
you know, a religion of one.
True. I see a lot of times that when I go to one of these crime scenes, they're just eclectic. You know, they're
Mhm.
grabbing from different places, and they don't have a consistency in the rituals or the pentagram. or they're using tetragrammaton, the
Right.
scriptures, ayin sub, or some of them will actually have this in the sephiros of the Kabbalah. And Kabbalah is magic. The ancient wisdom of the Kabbalah is not the Kabbalah that we know from Hollywood. You have Keter, Chokmah, Binah, Chesed, Nesach, Tetragrammaton, Tifareh, Yod, Yesod, Malkuth. And then you have 32 paths of divination, which were later integrated as a result of the magical contemplations and invocations of archangels. So this type of magic has been practiced throughout the ages by the Hebrew traditions back in the days of Moses.
Right.
In their religion, you can't practice the Kabbalah until you're 37 years of age. And it's pure magic at its best. And we have Martinez de Pasquales with the Martinez order in France from the 1800s, who got initiated into the Kabbalah and later on brought it as an indoctrination into a lot of the secret societies. And they derive a lot of their magical concepts from there. But at no time do they practice black magic or demonic Satanism. We have a lot of people, every time there's a fictional movie involving any of these things, people pick up an interest, and I say, like, hey, something, the ceremonies in church are really quite boring, it's always the same thing. I want to put some more excitement. They see a lot of, or it could be by peer group, or it could be a cult of a leader with a lot of personality, like you have in Scientology, and power structures based on a lot of promises. They sell you a lot of dreams, and like David Kadash, real handsome guy from Waco, Texas, and he has his ranch, which was very expensive to maintain as a result of his biblical apocalyptic views. And at the time it made a lot of sense. People from Heaven's Gate in California,
Exactly.
I forgot his name, it doesn't come out.
Right, the Haley Bob.
And the UFOs are coming to pick us up. Make sure you have $5 for the transportation, all dressed in black with their Nike shoes and cover themselves and so forth. Jim Jones with the Kool-Aid with cyanide, hundreds of people in mass suicide who had a consistency of going down the abyss regardless of the consequence of the livelihood of the future of their children. Complete madness. And society in itself, in the decadence of wanting something, they find some attributes that some type of leaders gives them, and that's what cults are like. And I know a very famous cult as a fraternal order in San Jose, California. They're multi-billionaires. They drain $300 million a year. And don't ask, and they're non-profit, and they claim that we're peaceful, world peace, and all of that. And people don't know any different. And it's an imperator. That's what they call him. He's there for life.
So let me ask you, and this is the thing, and I do believe in the freedom of religion, absolutely. I think my problem comes in where, at some point in time, you're asked to sacrifice your life or your well-being and that of your family members. And if you're an adult and you're responsible for children, you're bringing them along into this thing. That's where I'm thinking, okay, now we're going into dangerous territory.
Jim Jones hit it on the nail. He had Nancy Reagan appear in his Church of God church, and he was in defiance of traditional religion,
And I think that strikes a chord also sometimes
with a lot of people, and mostly were African Americans, and from very poor, not even middle class. So there wasn't a lot of professionals in there, but it was an escape route. Everybody has an agenda.
Well, I think, and I think that what happens, besides Jim Jones or any scenario, that a lot of people, when they look at, hindsight is 20/20. When they look at the actual outcome of what happened, that was a terrible. I think at what point did anybody at some point say, "Wait a minute, this sounded great at the beginning," or this, like you said, all these promises. At what point did anybody just say, "Whoa, no, I'm out of here"?
No, very few. Applegate from Heaven's Gate in California with the UFO story, when everybody committed suicide. If you look at every individual there were middle class and upper class, very sane, very rational, and before they committed suicide, they went on record, on tape, like we're doing now, and they said, "I'm happy to go. I'm really convinced this is the way it's going to be, and the apocalypse is coming." And
I believe some of the men had also committed self-castration.
Castration, absolutely. No.
You talk to most men, and they're like, "What?"
Don't tell that to
This is the point where, like, I'm getting off.
Don't tell that to Hispanics. They're like, "You go first." And when you heard Applegate speaking, he was very convincing. He can practically justify anything, rationalize it. You know. And again, the persona, the charisma, it's something that captures the lure. I mean, I can play that game. I have enough knowledge in parapsychology in order to lure anyone and to create my own little group. And I can just look straight into the camera and says, like, "You're all more than welcome to come to me, and trust me, you will find a future like you never have." And then again, that's just acting, and that's 101. And Herbert was able to do that in Scientology, and he did it always. If you ever see all his documentaries when he's talking, I mean, he's just laughing it off, and they say, "But you have no evidence as to such thing." And he goes, "Well, what is evidence if it's not a man's findings? There's more above and beyond." And you look at that and you go like, he's got a good point in that.
Well, and exactly, for every one person that was like, "I don't get it," there was somebody that basically said exactly what you just said.
Yeah, it's all a matter of perspective. But cults are very dangerous. I don't recommend it to anyone. Religion can also be a cult. I think have God in your heart. That's the main thing. That's the best temple.
Right, exactly.
That's the best temple.
I'm a big believer in self-preservation.
Yeah, you were asking me. Yeah, you were asking me earlier. The level of risk that I take when I go undercover to some of these places, and I just finished doing an expose that is in the process.
Right, which I know that I'm going to stop you right there because you promised that we're going to do a future show
on that
when you're able to. Because I know right now you're in the middle of it.
Right. I'm by contract with a major television channel, and I cannot disclose the particulars, but I can give an overview. Just like a preview when you go to the movies. Mm-hmm. And I was fortunate enough because I'm going to be the first Hispanic on that channel, which is really amazing. So I'm honored to be there if it all comes to fruition. But yeah, La Santa Muerte, which you're the one who enlightened me with that coincidentally. I give credit to Marlene here, because I had no clue about La Santa Muerte. After studying all type of demonologies and all type of Satanism and rituals and black magic and black orders and black lodges, whatever have you. And I heard of them, but I never looked into them in depth. You have to go to Mexico for that. And it's very clandestinely made. And the relation that they have with the cartel and the sequestering of children for Black Sabbath, and it's a multi-million-dollar industry. And
which is scary because when we talked about, I said there's a folklore belief in Santa Muerte, but not to the degree of what we're talking about. It's very innocuous, very there's absolutely nothing tied in with sacrificing or darkness or anything. But then you see some aspects, depending on the interpretation of who's looking at it, where they take that belief system or that representation of holy death or low, and then they, of course, depending on what they're into and what their lifestyle and in this case criminal activity, all of a sudden this is what they worship because it integrates into what they're doing.
Right. Paganism at its best. We got to remember that.
Or death cult, or
most of the practitioners of this horrific ritual are people that are non-educated, really lower class. They have no hope whatsoever in Juarez. They seldom have opportunities of employment, labor, anything in relation to what we have in abundance in our society. That's why the Mexicans risk their life to the fullest trying to cross over the desert, whether in New Mexico, Arizona, or Texas. Or the same token, we have also, as an analogy, in Miami, the practice of black magic through Santeria, Brujeria, in Paleros, Santeros.
Right, it always seems there's always a darker version of certain belief systems that go off what they call, for lack of a better word, the left-hand path.
The left-hand path.
Where it doesn't. It's not the everyday life, you
Right.
know, or influencing or asking for a favor or whatever the outcome. Where they go off the left-hand path, and we're talking here: violence, crime,
Right.
murder, bloodletting, or in this case, in a lot of these religions, the quid pro quo with whatever entity, you know, bloodletting in exchange for protection,
Right.
for divination, for whatever the case might be.
Now that you mentioned protection, I was able to interview Lázaro Betancourt, who used to be the captain in charge of Fidel Castro's bodyguard detail. 10 years ago in the Dominican Republic, Fidel Castro was there visiting on the Pan American conference, and Lázaro Betancourt migrated. Anyways, he comes to the United States, he's giving political exile status, and they interview him and so forth. And I got a chance to talk to him and interview him, and I said, what's the story with this man? Why didn't you shoot him? Why didn't you kill him?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, put an end to this. And he says, listen, I practice black magic. You know, I'm a santero, and I have the cortados and all of these things where they cut themselves. I said, Fidel Castro went to Nigeria, and they sacrificed a human being over there.
Wow.
And the protection that he has works. And if it didn't work, trust me on the following. The FBI tried to kill him, failed. They hired the mafia, failed. Organizations of revolutionaries financed by the CIA, Alpha 66, Omega, OPLC, Comando C, failed. People closer to him,
Right.
failed.
There's several
And you know,
types.
give me a break. The guy did not even get ahead. So it does make you think, wait a minute, you know, if there's such power
And let me
that
tell
the
you,
dark
I
forces
had
can
never
provide.
heard this before. I'm not saying it didn't happen. Absolutely, coming from a source like that, you have to believe it. But wow.
Yeah,
It's
it's
incredible.
amazing. So I have actually interviewed people that have had that type of satanic protection. I mean, there's over, 300 botanicas in Miami, Florida that are making hundreds of thousands of dollars as a result of selling animals for sacrifices, which
Right.
is legal in the ordinance of Hialeah by the code enforcement. And very few take it to the next level because human
Right,
sacrifice
exactly.
is not
So
allowed.
there's
But
a-
you know, las limpiezas that they talk about and the beads and things that sell for $10,000, where you know we can sacrifice a cow, that'll be another $5, and we can do the chicken cleansing, that'll be another $400. And you know they're all exploiting the system and the paganism mentality of the Cubans, of this Afro-Cuban traditions when these African
But you
slaves
know
were
what?
brought in there.
The thing is this, that because there's always some version of it, because of, you know, like you said, in Haiti, there's the, you know, the voodoo. From Brazil, there's candomblé.
Right.
There's, you know, you even have different versions of voodoo, depending, let's say if you're from New Orleans versus, you know, of course, in Miami,
Right.
because of the Cuban
More French.
population, you get the Santeria and Brujeria and, you know, all this. But, you know, they all have their common denominators, okay, as far as being, according to them, nature-based out of African religious beliefs that came with the slave trade. But I guess my thing is, even though personally I would never sacrifice an animal, but if,
But
you
you
know-
do every time you eat a hamburger.
okay, no, that's not the way I see it. But the thing is this, I think there's, if that's the religious belief, which, like I said, there's a big difference between that and sacrificing a human being. That's like, to me, that's,
The ultimate.
I mean,
Let me tell you where they get it from. Funny enough, a lot of people don't know this. In Babylon, the first tablets of writing text come from the Sumerians. And the first image of archaeology of a demigod happened to be the fallen angel Lucifer, which is named Pazuzu. And this is found coincidentally in the fictional movie of The Exorcist. At the beginning, where you see this figurine of Pazuzu with one left
Exactly
arm
right.
and so forth. You know, that's an actual archaeological finding
Yes.
in Babylon, which is Iraq today. Something really funny, if you look at one of the books that I have in here, and it says Looting Iraq's Museum in Baghdad. Now, this museum happens to hold the cradle of civilization of archaeological findings and evidence of tablets and relics that were destroyed by the American military on purpose when there are United Nations law that prohibits such.
But you know what?
Let me tell you why.
Oh, okay, I want to hear this.
Oh,
Go
it's
ahead.
amazing. I made some phone calls over there, some friends of mine from Blackwater, and I said, you have to go there with one of the interpreters, and you have to find out. In Iraq, there is the religious practice of devil worshipping of Pazuzu since back in the days of the beginning of civilization, and it's maintained active today with over 2,500 members.
Really?
Completely unknown. Well, you know, I'm a demonologist expert in theory.
And I'm going to interrupt you because
Yeah.
the thinking is that this part of the world is mostly Muslims.
Must practice
So
the Quran.
they don't believe. Most people think that type of belief system doesn't exist there anymore.
And it's very active. And Pazuzu is a fallen angel. Now, when you Google Pazuzu and you get WikiLeaks, the interpretation that they give is not accurate. So, of course, we have to settle for the amateur scholar who hasn't traveled over there or done proper research in order to say. And they say, no, it's for good luck and it's to ward off evil spirits. No, it's not for that. You know, which is amazing sometimes. You know, what Wikipedia
So what
can do with misinterpreting history. And,
what did these Blackwater sources tell you as to why they would get rid of these? Because of that? Because
well,
of
what I was after was a contact with the museum, which I was able to obtain by someone who's there on a grant trying to rebuild. A lot of these items were put on sale on the black market in containers that were taken to England and United States. But there was a purpose. Now, Nicolas Roerich established what is called the Banner of Peace, which was approved in the United Nations in 1932 not to interfere with art for any particular country during the times of war. Of course, Hitler did that, and the rest is history. We know that story. But anyways, United States should have known better because they actually target these museums that contain the cradle or archaeological findings with scriptures, with how everything started. You know, they predates predates not only the Babylonians in itself, the Sumerians, but predates the Egyptians, which is really amazing.
Now, I know that they've, in this part, ISIS has also demolished a lot of, you know,
Statues.
archaeological,
Right.
you know, cities and statues and things, which is a loss. But I was, you know, I was unaware also that this had happened as well with these findings.
A lot of the tubes contain ancient scriptures, and some of them were written in not only in parchment, that was a century later, because they started writing in clays. It's the first actual alphabet written in the history of civilization.
Mm-hmm.
The funny part, it was incantations for the invocations in ritual of the powers of nature and the sun and the air and the moon and the planets, which is amazing. You know, we have to look also like jumping from history from one sector to the other. Copernicus, you know, was able to put in retrospective cosmology and astronomy as everything without having a telescope. You know, that's completely amazing. You know, and how did he do that? And you know, he did it to perfection. You know, so back in those days, there was man of wisdom. You know, the Egyptians, for example, till this day, we cannot replicate that pyramid on sandy conditions where there are no other.
I know that they're
there's
still
no
trying to figure out
surrounding
exactly how they
rock
did it.
foundations or tools to justify the architectonic lifting, the weight, the cutting, and so forth. And of course, you have people that say, like, well, I'm an archaeologist, graduate from Harvard. They go there, he gives an opinion, so I becomes an authority. Wrong. So, you know, I have traveled all of these places. You know, I'm just not talking. Every time I write a book, I take a year off. You know, when I did my Secret Societies Exposed, which, by the way, my book was plagiarized by Dan Brown for the Da Vinci Code, the same as Holy Blood, Holy Grail by Lincoln and Beijing. You know, my book was published 2 years before the Da Vinci Code, actually.
Okay.
And the publishing house said, we're going to get sued if we publish this. So I had to go to Canada to publish that with Trafford. When I was first author Hispanic in CNN International to ever appear as an author, my book then was compared to the Da Vinci Code back then. and I sold 1 million copies in 72 hours. So it's a very, 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 very good success. Unfortunately, Trafford kept my royalties and they stole the money.
Okay.
So you get a personal satisfaction if you didn't do it for profit. I did it more to compound a year's explorations into secret societies, which are there, so, and the Mahatmas and so forth, and all these religions and all these occult related matters that everybody has a peculiar interest nowadays.
And which is we're going to get back to that in through the ages, whenever you have a religion or a set of belief systems, okay, and usually when there's some type of occult connection, it's usually kept on a subversive level, on a very low profile. You understand?
Extremely,
what I'm saying?
yes.
Okay, and some people will say, well, they had to do that because, if let's say the church, she would have been persecuted. But I think that there's also a quality of that the general population would not have understood.
Right.
Okay, certain practices, especially if it included human sacrifice.
Right.
For whatever reason. You understand what I'm saying? Which is that I think that a lot of the in-your-face stuff now is like, you know what? There's something much worse in this, and usually when somebody's up to something truly, truly evil, it's not that in your face. Because you're going to get busted for it, or you're going to be exposed, and that's going to be the end of that. And a lot of it, we have Hollywood to thank for that. Now, I'm going to take another little, talking about whether you want to call it religious practice or belief system, Freemasonry.
Before that, you mentioned about Hollywood. Mel Gibson made this wonderful movie, Apocalypto,
Yes.
which is worthy of watching, which explains during the times of the Aztecs and the Mayans,
Right.
the practice of human sacrifices, and that's one of the reasons why they built these pyramids and so forth. So it was an honor to be sacrificed, and the sacrifice felt an honor to be chosen for the gods of the underworld.
This is the thing, not according to those poor victims. They thought that, if that movie was the prisoners, which I understand that, that's how they treated the prisoners of war, as sacrifices. And it was like, yeah, it was an honor, but according to the priests, but not the poor victims who were like, basically...
Well, they had to be depicted with certain anxiety in that movie for that purpose, but they felt an honor for that, which is quite amazing. And there's really a correlation between the pyramids of Mexico and some of these other locations to those in Egypt, which is quite amazing. And that's one of the reasons, as you were mentioning, why the Freemasons uses the pyramid as a symbol in their fraternal order.
Right, which makes you think, okay, if these are two civilizations that are on different continents, okay, and that don't supposedly have any connection, how did they, what the pyramid as far as the shape, was it, some people say, well, it's reaching to the heavens, to the gods, or, how is it that they both, even though there's also pyramids all over the world in different areas, like how did these different civilizations...
Yeah, but not to that magnitude. Yeah, the Incas and the Mayas were able to accomplish equally as those of the Egyptians. You have to give them credit.
Oh, absolutely.
And actually, possibly more impressive. But because they're in Mexico, they don't get that much recognition.
Well, I think what happened was that also, unfortunately, that some of the connotations with human sacrifice that they had. I think it was, I don't know if it was the Aztec or the Mayans, I'm not sure. And that some other cities were abandoned.
The Incas, right.
And then, of course, when the Europeans came and the decimation of the the Mesoamericans that lived there versus the Egyptians, basically, it was a different, that civilization kind of evolved slower, but there was more ways of authenticating it. They had the Library of Alexandria, all these things.
Well, the Egyptians, a lot of people don't realize this, it was Akhenaton who came up with the first concept of monotheistic beings, meaning only one God, instead of the god of water, the god of the wind, and the forms of birds which were representative of such. So they picked certain effigies, human body like with a bird face. Well, that represented the bird of the air. But people look at that and go like, well, that's paganism, what's going on? Misinterpretation. That's where archaeology serves a great purpose in providing scientific evidence and conclusions of history as it was, can be, and will be. You know, but the Egyptians were advanced in itself in many, many ways that are still completely undiscovered. The Rosicrucian order, not the one from the United States, but the one from France, do hold the secrets as to the way in which the pyramids were built.
Hi, this is Marlene again. So I hope you enjoyed that last segment. I thought it was very interesting. And now we're going to go towards the end, and we're going to talk about the Knights Templar because, as you know, there's connection between the Freemasons and the Templars, and we're going to talk about different mystic writers and gurus because Charlie has done a lot of traveling to a lot of places and authenticated some of the sources, and you're going to see what I mean when you hear that interview about what the actual meaning or writings have been versus what's out there. And you're going to see it. It's very interesting because he's going to do his best impersonation of Indiana Jones. You'll see.
Bottom, Ordo Seclorio, and which means New World Order. So you think about, well, there goes the conspiracy theories. We're now in a New
Right,
World
there
Order.
you go, okay.
You know, and the cap side is always missing. You know,
Right.
if you look at that.
And
And we're surrounded with a lot of symbology and stuff in here that I have, which demonstrates some of the history of that. Just like the same for the Knight Templars of the sector of the Freemasons, in hoc signo vincens, in Latin, with this sign thou shalt conquer. And Constantine, emperor during that era, and when he went into battle, he made a vow that if he was to win this battle, he would grant Christians in Constantinople the order of the day. And he won the battle, and he saw this cross, and that's how we come into being.
Okay.
And so there's always been a relationship underlying Freemasonry with the Vatican, which has been a conflict with Freemasonry, but not with the Knight Templars orders. And there are Knight Templars orders in Europe, like the Knights of the Rose-Croix, that are still extremely active from the day of the Middle Ages, believe it or not. Very, very
Right,
active.
because a lot of people, the usual consensus is that the Knight Templar, after they were persecuted, they were eradicated, the few members that were left all became disbanded.
Like in Philip during 1314, and Jacques de Molay was burned at the stake with 300 other
Exactly.
ones. Then they fled with their treasures.
But they were basically disbanded, is what the belief is.
They were going after the treasures. Got to remember, the Knight Templars are the ones who established the banking system as we know it today, and trading of international commerce. I mean, those are registers in archives in a lot of these libraries that are out there. United States predominantly is a young country. It's a 200 and some odd years. Europe is over 1,000 or more, and the buildings provide history in itself. So back then they put a lot of symbols in masonry when they were building it, and that's where masonry comes into play in the 1700s in France and England. And as a result, a fraternity was created, and then different secular orders grew as a result of that, and it became an international success. The founding fathers, predominantly the ones who wrote the Constitution of the United States, the other ones followed through. The foundation of America, and I think that the most beautiful document in the world has to be the Constitution of the United States. There's just no doubt about that.
Exactly.
I've been to Washington, D.C., and I'm mesmerized by reading it and seeing it. The thoughts that these fraternal brothers had, foreseeing the future of America, and now seeing how all these presidents are in defiance of the Constitution of America and self-destructing civil rights and whatever have you, as we can see, it's a shame. It really is. But Freemasons, they're not as active as they used to be. We're men of high caliber, high morals, principles, values, and we stand in society.
But you know that and I'm sure you've seen it in some of the shows where, they want to give like occult aspect to Freemasonry, or that the practices that they have, that because they're secret,
True.
and because the mystical aspect and the ceremonies, that
Right.
That there's something wrong or bad
Right.
with it. And what do you say about that? Since
I think we touched on this before, also similar because I've been hearing a lot of gossip, unsubstantiated, that in some lodges certain magic was being practiced.
Okay.
And behold the Lord, I was invited to one of them. And when I saw this, and it was in El Paso, Texas, and I noticed in the building that they had a pentagram in black and white, you know.
Which
So-
is not normally found
At
in-
all, not at all. You have the G that stands for the geometry of the universe or God, like a lot of people think. And then you have the Knight Templars. Then you have the Scottish Rite. Then you have the, you know, a whole bunch down the pipeline. But I went there and I inquired, and they recognized me from television from my book Secret Societies Exposed.
Okay.
They thought I was a practicing magician, which I used to be. The light forces, not the dark forces. And I was invited onto an underground temple, which I have
Okay.
photos, and I'll provide them for you for this program. You can copy them.
Okay.
And you had on your first floor the regular Scottish Rite, the second floor going down, your what is called the Blue Lodge, where all the members meet. You know, your enter apprentice, your fellow craft, and your master masons, where all the rituals and ceremonies are done. And then underground, he says, I want to show you something special, and we invite you to a special ritual and ceremony that we will hold for High Priest Magus. And I go, really? And when I go, and I said, well, it's probably joking around, you know, because Masons, they do have a great sense of humor. And when they opened this unassuming door, there it was, you know, black and white, and the altar like a black Sabbath, and the forces of darkness fighting the forces of light with the snakes and the serpents. And
Wow.
then I was like, you got to be kidding me. I said, yeah. And I said, he said, active? He says, yeah. And I said, well, I'd love to be a participant and see what's going on. No sacrificials or anything like that. But they're practicing magic.
Now, why is this? How did you know? Are they like an offshoot that decided that they're going to add this aspect of Freemasonry, or what happened?
Freemason does not have that in any way, shape, or form. Albert Pike did integrate it in his teachings of the Scottish Rite of the high degrees of 32nd, which I am, and I'm about to become a 33 honorary, which is the highest you can reach. He introduced the Kabbalah aspect, but he left it up to the brothers of Freemasons, being Master Masons, to pursue that. He gave you the keys, but you have to look for the doors. What makes this peculiar lodge is that they integrated there. I was able to get a hold of the document granting this lodge the practice of magic.
So basically, this was not something that they just decided to do all by themselves. And in other words, they got an okay.
You're going to love this. The lodge was built in 1932.
What?
That far back.
And they're doing this since 1932 with
They've
this
been doing this since 1932.
Wow.
Believe it or not. And I'm in fear of mentioning the name because well, it's not known, number one.
Okay.
But it's within the Royce-Croix order, which is very antique. It was brought in here back during the times of the 1700s by Paul Revere, you know.
Okay.
And I just couldn't believe it. I said, "Oh my God!
So let me
How can
ask
they
you-
keep this secret for so
Well,
many
that
years?"
was my question. How could they do this and let's say other Freemasons be totally like what happened with you that you were like, what is this?
I'm going to tell you something. The movie of Dan Brown
Okay.
was excellent, and I have to really tell you, I did that trip and everything that happened in there. I went through that before it was even a movie, you know, and I have evidence and records of that established because of my book when it got published and the photos and travels that I did. So it's very, very accurate. Of course, take some of the fictional aspects of the shootings out, but Opus Dei does engage in that type of behavior with the Vatican. Number one.
Okay.
The Black Robes do engage in that type of rituals, which I know that order, which I am not going to mention, and it's a Black
Okay.
Lodge related. Temple Church in England, which Dan Brown failed to recognize. Holy Blood, Holy Grail, which is a book in which Dan Brown plagiarized from, also, which he had to pay a settlement of a lawsuit because of that, for the plagiarism. They failed to, there was an effigy, even in the movie, and you see the Knight Templar,
Right.
and they never showed the name of the Knight Templar. And I have it in my book. And I took a picture of that, And then that
When you went there.
When I went there, and that in itself caused an investigation for me to go to France,
Okay.
to Toulouse, that used to be during the medieval days the capital of Paris. And then that took me, when I had an initiation there through another order, back into Toledo, Spain, which used to be during the medieval days the capital
Exactly.
of Spain. So you have Toulouse, Toledo. Toulouse, Toledo. So right there is a code, and I was able to decipher it, and that brought me back into what I did, which I explained in my book. The effigy is Knights of the Rose-Croix. Now, England, back in those days, during the medieval days, was in battle with France over the 100-year-old war.
Okay.
You know, so it's impossible for them to be honoring a Knight Templar of an effigy in the middle of the temple, which is really a Knight Temple church from back in the days. I mean, it's unbelievable. Like the castle is still practically intact, you know, and that was in this hatred. So why would they honor England at that time a Knight Templar of the Rose-Croix? Because it is assumed that the Knight Templars of the Rose-Croix are the ones that are safeguarding the Cup of Christ and some other items.
So let me, I want to ask you, I got to ask you, do you think that the Knights Templar still exist?
Yes, they are very active. I belong to one of those orders.
Okay. All right.
From France.
Right, and I guess not necessarily because everybody thinks of the Knights Templar as the knights on, you know, with the black, you know, with the white, with the
No,
the
no,
red,
no.
and everybody's always thinking of that. I'm thinking, you know what?
They don't carry the
People can
sword
re-
or the shield.
Right, you can reorganize and just make yourself look different, but that doesn't mean that you don't exist.
The Vatican has the Knights of Malta, and they're very active.
Yes, exactly.
In Rhodes, Malta, which is an independent sovereign city, they also have that, which is no relationship one with the other.
Okay.
The Masons have a Knight Templars order of the York Rite, what they call it.
Okay.
The one that I belong to, which I was fortunate to be affiliated with, is the Knights of the Rose-Croix from France.
Okay.
And of course, that in itself,
That stemmed from the original Knights Templar.
that dates back from back in the days of the Middle Ages. And how do you confirm that? You have the authentic certificates, the seals, the rings, and you have artifacts that predates during that period. And that in itself are compounded and is
Now,
shown.
I'm going to ask you a question, which you might have the answer. You might go, I have no idea, Marlene. But, you know, when the Knights Templar, when they took all them prisoner and basically they were interrogating all of them, you know, for being heretics, supposedly.
Right.
That was the excuse given by, you know, the King of France and the Pope and all this. You would think that the Knights Templar, being as well connected as they were very powerful, like you said. They had money, they owned land. They were very, very powerful, which is one of the reasons why they say they really were disbanded. Nobody whispered in their ear and said, hey, you better be careful because the Pope and this and all these powers are looking at you guys.
No.
So you need to get out of town. I'm thinking to myself, nobody warned these guys? You would think
No,
they would
it
have
did.
spies everywhere.
It did occur. Keller from Germany wrote Maleus Maleficarum, the compendium. And if you read this book, for those that are interested, how the Inquisition for the accusation of sorcerers and witches were done, it was written in a format of legality, in order to prosecute the Knight Templars. They didn't want anyone to have a secular understanding of the forces of nature. They wanted you to follow this rigid dogmatism and being brainwashed into religion, which ruled the day, and of course the wealth expanded. Yeah, they were set in motion. The Pope united with the King, and they set up to entrap them for their wealth, because they presumably had with them discovered the Ark of the Covenant with the Ten Commandments, because they were really good explorers, and they were in horseback ride all the time. They owned castle, they owned a lot of wealth.
They participated in the Crusades, and they were.
This is where they have access to ships in those days, and they never were able to find the treasures of gold and coins of the days, which they have this many things of this island that keeps on getting explored, which people have lost.
Island.
Yeah, which people have lost their lives and everything, and till this day they've gone a mile down and they find woods that are structured in such a way that are consistent with people reaching that day, and well, how the heck did that get that mile down?
Yeah,
back
to begin
in the
with,
days,
anyway,
which is quite unusual. But nothing has come to that. I don't think that they would have taken, by the time you finish digging a mile down, you pass another century. It's not there. It got spread through the banking industry in Europe. That's where it is at. And they have underground banks that have no names, that is for the strictly wealthy, and those peculiar items that are not to be, again, accessible to adversarial parties, like Hitler, like the Clintons, for example. He got involved in certain questionable things in Europe which never came into surface, and things like that. So some of these secret orders, they maintain themselves secrets for a reason, and it's just not only the wisdom and the teachings, but a lot of these artifacts that
so
are
it's not
crucially
only
important.
some conspiracy theories are just more than theories, is what you're saying. Some of them have some basis in fact.
Some of them have some basis in fact, absolutely. But I hate all these people that write about conspiracy theories like the Illuminati and so forth, and they never actually taken the time to go to the Scottish Grand Lodge of the Sovereign Grand Commander in Washington, D.C. You have to travel. You're going to talk about Tibet and the Lamas, you have to get on an airplane and go there. But they use other books as references,
Right.
and they're excellent writers. They're professors at English, ghost writers, and then they quoted from this guy that never got past his home, and he quoted from another guy. So it's a lot of misinformation, and unfortunate. And that's what we're doing nowadays. We have access to the internet. People from different parts of the world are collaborating.
Right.
And the accessibility of traveling is a lot better than back in the
Absolutely,
days.
sure.
And you get information. The stuff that I discovered in the Museum of England, which is for me is the best in the world, I discovered things in there that are in contrary to the Mahatma letters of A.P. Spinet by the Theosophical Society. And the Mahatmas did exist, Master Moria and Master Kutumi. And they went to university over there, and I was able to see their transcripts, and they went to Cambridge, study languages. But the Theosophical Society in Chicago, what they wrote is 100% different of what the Mahatmas are writing. And here they're telling you have to abstain completely from any intimacy, you have to be 100% a vegetarian, and that's not so. So I confronted them with them, and I said, why are you lying? So then they had a communication, and the Theosophical Society telling the Museum of England, do not disclose anymore the Mahatma letters to anyone. And they put a restriction now.
Right, and you know what, and this is the thing, you make a good point. Not everybody is able to travel firsthand to look at something at a source, because this is basically what you're talking about, a source of whatever, and say, hey, you know what, now that I'm looking at this, if you're given access.
And that's why I have my Indiana Jones traveling hat,
all right,
which distinguishes me everywhere that I go. And I go there as an investigator, to unfold and to divide fiction from reality and then report it. And I make it accessible for everybody.
And I think that's very important because, like you said, the internet is very powerful, and it has brought allows people to see things, that before wasn't acceptable. But at the same time, it's also a source of misinformation because people will say things with authority, never, like you said, having traveled and gone to the source and seen it firsthand and said, you know what, that's exactly right, or no, where, like you said, this is not what's being put out there. As a matter of fact, it's the total opposite.
It's funny, I have a book over here by Andrew Thomas. And Andrew Thomas wrote a book called Shambhala. And he was a prolific writer. And I met him, and he used to be a disciple of Nicolas Roerich, who also wrote a book on Shambhala, equivalent of Shangri-La, Agartha, both Russians, and very mystical individuals. And there were attorneys, authors, writers, very artistic, very prolific. And I remember that we share a commonality because we've been out there, and when we write, it's because we've been participating in what we're talking about.
Okay.
And that's what distinguishes us. Unfortunately, we don't write with fictional drama characters, and the night was moist and the beautiful wind was blowing as I was capturing the reflection of the lake with the flowers and embossment. That's what people want. We're not that type. We're like reporters. We're straight to the point. By the way, this is the way it is. Take it or leave it. Moving right along.
Not a dark and stormy night kind of, But and I agree. Depending, if you're going to write fiction, sure you could do that. But if you're saying that you're writing nonfiction,
right, then
you need to stick to the facts.
We're reporting
as best you know them.
And,
and if you don't know them, then don't say you do.
Yeah.
And
no, I've been lucky that all my 3 books have received literary awards. And I say to everyone, I don't consider myself an author whatsoever.
So Charlie, before we end this, and I know that besides being an author, you also do private investigations for certain clients under certain circumstances.
Right.
And I know you pick and choose your clients, but if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, what's the website that they can find you at?
CharlesDelCampo.com. Everything is in there. Or you can Google me just saying Charles Del Campo, and they'll find me. Or you can go to images, YouTube, or you can go to videos. I'm splattered all over the place. Okay. Funny enough, I have the government on top of me deleting me out of Google search engines.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Why is that?
Well, last year I was involved as a political activist, and I was divulging a lot of secret materials. Let's just call it like that.
Something. So, and I hate to say this, but you know what? You get deleted from Google, and that pretty much makes you disappear because that's where everybody looks up things. So
they
yeah.
do. So I used
now you gotta move to Yahoo.
Yeah, gotta move to Yahoo. So I used to have like 75 pages. Now I'm down to 3. But if you go to images, you can link to those photos that will take you internationally to some of the other networks that people keep on putting in their following.
So let me ask something. When I know, like we mentioned earlier, that you're in the middle of a case, and I'm lucky to have grabbed you here. When do you think you're going to be done with that, or you don't know yet?
I think I have about another 30 days. I have to return to the target area and finalize, with law enforcement information that is going to be provided. The problem is that some of the law enforcement people are involved in the investigation.
Okay, so you can't.
Right.
Are you going to write a book about that? Or
I thought about it, and I'm debating it. But it's that on this particular thing, they're making a documentary, a movie, and they're writing a book. So by contract, I can't. I can write about some of the other cult satanic investigations that I've done.
That you've worked
but
on.
Yeah, but in this one in particular, we will surmise everything. I mean, it's really way up there.
Okay. So that sounds really interesting. I look forward to finding out what the outcome of that case is, because based on the little that you've told me, it sounds like it's very disturbing.
Extremely, yes.
Okay, but if it's the truth, it's the truth, right?
Yeah. Well, we need to create awareness and let a lot of people know what's going out there to take safeguards. That's what it's all about.
Yes. Okay, well, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. And I hope you enjoyed this interview with Charles Del Campo. And tune in next week when I bring you another interesting guest that we're going to talk about all this very interesting and unusual thing.
Hi, this is Marlene, and here we are at the end of the show. I'm hoping you did enjoy a very interesting conversation, I thought, with a very interesting and original person who's done a lot of traveling, is engaged in a lot of interesting adventures. And again, I'm hoping you're going to subscribe to my channel and you're going to like this video. I'm going to be putting out at least once per week, like I said, different authors, experts, witnesses, having to do with paranormal. It could be UFOs, cryptids, ghosts, mysticism, anything along those lines. And again, I'm hoping that the viewers are going to give me feedback what they'd like to see more of and what they didn't like. And this is going to be, what I'm going to use to bring, especially people that are new in the field. And also, I am going to be going out and doing investigations, and I'll be broadcasting them live so that you can all, enjoy. And sometimes, like I said, sometimes the supernatural is not an on-demand thing. But every once in a while you get lucky. And also, at one point, I am going to do a show where I interview myself because I've had a lot of requests for that. Not only to talk about my experiences with the paranormal and what I've done. Also, I have degrees in mental health, and I'm a certified hypnotherapist. And I also work a lot in the field of spirit release therapy, and I have always had a lot of requests for more information about that. It's not as dramatic as possessions, even though a lot of people see it along those lines. But I am going to do a show just about hypnosis and how that works with spirit attachments and how that influences people in a lot of areas of their life. It's a very, very interesting subject, and I hope you're going to like that show. But I'll post information about it. Below, you're going to see links to my website, Miami Ghost Chronicles. You're also going to see links to Charles' website. Also, I'm going to put a link on there that I have for my hypnosis website, where I speak in particular about spiritual attachment and how hypnosis works. And, if I find anything else interesting, I'll put the link on there. So again, please subscribe to my channel and like this video. And I'm hoping that when I come on back live, I'll be giving shout outs to any participants. So if you like it, please tell others about it. Take care.